A whole lot of whooping and a hollering going on. Is this microphone better down here or up here? Up here, okay. Wow. My first time in here. This is awesome. Really awesome. Just a bit overwhelmed, Chuck. Wow. Well, we sure live in interesting times, don't we? And we need to be convinced that we are here by the design and purpose of God. We don't live when we live by chance. We live in this time because God wanted us to be here in this time, which leads us to the next obvious point or statement, which is we need to be asking the Lord why. We need to know why we're here. What is our role? We're in a great place of history, challenging, but has the potential to be the most fruitful, I believe, season for the kingdom. And we have been busy lately, haven't we? We have painted the border of every state and county in America. I think the last picture sent to me was just a few days ago from the top of the world up in Alaska, with some Eskimos holding up their Bibles and whale bones, and thought, man, stay out of these people's way. They know how to do it up here. And Mary Glacier, you know, when she prayed over those arrowheads. Most of you know about this. If you don't, you're probably in the wrong place. But, you know, I just knew it was to be Mary. When this brother, the 300 arrowheads were sent to me a couple of years ago by a man I still have never met. And they just showed up in the mail. He said, I've been praying, walking the fields of North Carolina for several years. God told me if I would walk and intercede, he would give me artifacts of the First Nations people and connect me to that inheritance. But I feel I'm to send you most of them. And he sent me 300. And it was like the water from the well of Bethlehem that was given to David. I just immediately said, I know I won't keep these. They're just too precious. But I know God will show me what to do with them. So they sat on a shelf for 2 years. And then I had that second dream, which unrelated, you know, another, not the command the forward, but a different dream, where a man came to me and we had been given supernatural bows and arrows, several intercessors and leaders, but the arrows didn't have arrowheads. And someone asked, shouldn't these have arrowheads? And he walked over to me in the dream and put his hands on my shoulders and said, it's time to use the Back to the Future arrowheads. And in the dream, I guess I said, what do you mean? He said, the 300 you were given. And that's when I knew this is the next phase of the dream, the fulfillment of the nation commanding the forward and connecting it not only to our covenant root there at Cape Henry, but to the First Nations people. And I just knew it had to be Mary. And she prayed a Incredible prayer. She's not here by any chance, is she? But then we sent her the 6 arrowheads, and I think maybe you saw in the post, she sent me a picture of one place they buried these. You know, Alaska's twice the size of Texas. Yeah, a little more than twice the size. Thank you very much. And they buried these things all over, like I said, clear up to the farthest north. And we didn't just bury them in one spot. One of the places she looked at, and she saw a rock that looked like a lion laying down. She said, we have to bury one right there. You're talking about a hole this size in the shape of a state twice the size of Texas that God led them to. And when they dug the hole, there was another arrowhead in it. So she said, there are 2 arrowheads in that hole. Just things like that happen all over the country. Absolutely incredible. I didn't say where this was in the post, so I talked about it, but one of the states, I'll tell you where it was, because you are here at Glory of Zion and Chuck's conference, and so. But in Massachusetts, the team had buried their 6 arrowheads, and someone said, I don't know who, I didn't know who was on most of these teams. Someone said, I wish we had another one for Martha's Vineyard. Just need one for Martha's Vineyard. And the leaders just said, well, who knows, maybe the Lord will give us another one. And so they drove to Martha's Vineyard to pray anyway, just wanted to go there and pray. And they're walking the beach, praying, and looked down, and there was another arrowhead. So they proudly reported to me, there are 7 of them buried in Massachusetts. Amazing, just story after story. I read these reports, and just half the time, just sat and cried. The 90-year-old woman said, I can't get out anymore, but I got a map, and every day I dip my finger in oil, and I pray the perimeter of my state every day. Just things like that, just incredible reports. So we're on track. You know, we're not there yet. God, He has other things we're going to need to be doing, obviously. Probably some tough times coming. Shaking, don't know what it is, but maybe Chuck will tell us one of these days. But I know we're as ready for it as we can get. And I know we're secured in the way the Lord wants us to be secured. And I know it's not to destroy us, but to save us. It's a merciful shaking is what I'm calling it. And, you know, part of that command the forward dream was at a certain point in the instructions and in the dream, at a certain point, the fire of God fell on the gathering. And it was what Gina Golston, in the dream, she called it a baptism of fire. There were thousands of intercessors gathered there and hundreds of leaders, and a baptism of fire. So the building began to shake, and the fire of God fell, and everyone was baptized in this, what she called a baptism of fire. And I believe this shaking is a twofold purpose. There have been 2 different dreams that God has given her where we commanded the forward. The first dream, she only heard the phrase, she didn't see it. So she assumed it was F-O-R-W-A-R-D, command the forward. She never did figure out what it meant because it didn't make any sense. You know, command us to go forward or command people to move forward, but command the forward, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, just didn't make any sense. But in the second one, she saw it spelled, and then it was F-O-R-E-W-O-R-D, like the forward, the first thing said about the nation. But in both dreams, when the forward was commanded, it released the shaking. It's like Elijah when he prayed for rain after 3 years when it was time for their reset. But a lot of people forget that Elijah prayed for the drought. The book of James tells us it was not only Elijah, it was his prayers not only caused the rain to begin again after 3 years, but his prayers were used by God to create the drought. And our commanding of the forward is creating the shaking that is coming to save us. Evil is so entrenched in our land and in our leaders and just the nation in general that I'm sure that God, obviously, he knows there's just no other way to get rid of this than to shake it down. So pardon my French, but he's going to shake the hell out of it. But it's redemptive, just like in Elijah's day, it was redemptive. So what I want to talk about today from this point on is the fire, the revival, the reset that's coming. Because I was sent another dream several months ago, and I've just now gotten to really look at it. Sometimes I just put them on the shelf knowing God will show me when to look at this. This is the most detailed, in-depth dream I've ever been sent from Greg Hood, prophet. Greg, the details in the dream, he would know, and I've talked to him about it, he would know very, very few of these things in the natural, the dates that were given, the numbers that related to words in the Hebrew and Greek and names. I won't go into all of it today. It's too long and too detailed. But I'm going to give us the big picture because it's really a dream that pictures 12 past moves of God in history. Significant historical that shape where we are today, moves of God, not just like a revival that impacted a small, area or something. These were huge outpourings that were historical. And in this dream, there are bottles of, I'm just summarizing it now, then I'm going to get to some detail. There are bottles of old wine that represent each of these movements. But in the dream, a team of us go into an old wine cellar and a vat that's there, and we had to find the recipe of how to mix all of these together. And as we did, it created a new apostolic kingdom wine that at the end of the dream is released into the nation. And of course, it will be the nations, not just our nation. So I'm going to summarize it because it brings such hope. I'll be breaking this down in the future on some of the posts, but I think it's fascinating to see it, and I think it'll encourage you. So at the beginning of this dream, Greg and I are running through a battlefield here in Texas. We're being shot at as we run by weapons both from the natural and the spiritual realms. So people are trying to take us out, and demonic forces are trying to take us out. We ran toward a building. We saw a building that had some faint light, just very little light, but we could see a little light. And we thought, if we could get to that building, maybe we could find safety. And So we headed toward it, and on the way, an angel came and joined us and said, "Where are you going?" And we told him we're going to that building, and he made a trench for us. And the trench was deep enough that we could get in it and run with our heads below ground level where we could run safely, had a little bit of water in it. But we get to this building that has the light, faint light, and it's a church. It's a nice, new, big church. But the windows are all painted black. So you can just see a tiny bit of light through like scratches here and there in windows. Anybody see anything prophetic there? And we ran to the door. We did not know yet what we were carrying. We just knew we had a box. Well, we knew in the dream, but we weren't, those of us reading the dream, having the dream, we're not told yet what was in it. We just said to them, "We have something very precious here. We have to get it to the right place." And what it was the recipe of how to mix these together for the new wine. We have to make sure this is protected. Can you let us in? And they said, "No, we won't let you." They wouldn't open the door and say, "You're not welcome here." So I guess some of the church won't like what God's doing, right? We looked back at one point. I think I'm just trying to still discern some of this, but we looked back because we realized we were being chased because they had to keep running. And we looked back and there were people chasing us dressed as pharaohs. And I suppose that's Baal, you think? And Greg looked at me and says, "If you'll decree like you should, they'll be dealt with." And so I turned around and decreed over them, and the trench came together and buried them just like I did for Moses. So the angel, he takes us to another place. He says, I looked at Greg and I said, "Where are we going to go now? They won't let us in here." And the angel said, "Well, on the property in the back here is the oinos well house." Oinos. It means wine. A wine well. An old wine well. So we made our way, and the angel says right here, it was covered over with dirt. He said, "Dig right here." We dug there and we found a stone, and on top of the stone were two numbers, and those numbers are Hebrew words for crown and cornerstone. Crown and cornerstone. And he said, "If you will decree the code, Dutch, that stone will open and let you in." And he said, "You can decree it because he knows your voice." And the code was John chapter 17, verses 13 to 19. "But now I come to thee, and these things I speak in the world, that they may have my joy made full in them. I have given them thy word, and the world has hated them, because they're not of the world, even as I'm not of the world. I do not ask you to take them out of the world, but keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I'm not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As thou didst send me into the world, I have sent them into the world, and for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they themselves also may be sanctified in truth." And when I said that, the stone opened up and allowed us to get to the stairway. And the angel said, "Hurry, time is short. Ecclesia, you must get this right." That'll wake you up, won't it? We went into this wine cellar, and there was a table there, and we saw all these bottles waiting to be filled and corked. Then we saw a platform with a vat, a large vat, and the vat was empty. And there were a couple of guys removing the lid on the vat. And I looked at him and said, Jim, is that you? Tim, is that you? And it was Jim Hodges and my brother Tim. And I knew it was a dream from God when Tim looked at me in the dream and said, yeah, it's me. What took you so long? Jim, all of us just represent the ecclesia. Jim obviously represents Apostolic fathers. He's going to oversee this operation. Several of us are going to be involved in doing it from different streams and areas of leadership. Jim says, do you have it? And I say, yeah, we have it. We hand him a box. On top of it, it says justice and two words, a Hebrew word and a Greek word. They mean justice or to rule justly. It's the word for the foundation of God's throne, and the other word is the word for refreshing in Acts 3:19, anasuxis, which means the blowing of God's breath again intensely. And those are on this box. So it's a box of God's throne of justice, and it also represents his outpouring. Inside was a rolled up piece of paper, parchment. Jim takes it out and he looks at it. He says, we have the recipe. He says, Dutch, you come over and help me decipher this. Greg and Tim, go in the other room and get the people with their old wine ready to come pour into this. He starts reading the recipe and he says to us, these wines have to be mixed in a certain fashion. You can't just pour them all in almost like a recipe in the kitchen. A little of this one, then this one. You got to do it in a certain order. Some of them poured them in separately. Some of them, they all had to be poured in at the exact same time. Jim, and I find this fascinating, as an apostolic father, he says, I've been working on the vat for decades. I can't believe we're going to use it in my day. Overwhelmed. He reaches on the floor and grabs a gold plate that's laying there. He dusts it off and puts it on the vat again. And the plate says Basileus Ecclesia, which means kingdom ecclesia. Kingdom ecclesia. Then he says to Tim, now Tim, this recipe says, before every pour, you're going to have to put a filter over this. So it filters out, the debris, whatever the stuff is called in wine. But every pour, you have to put another filter on there. And the filter was called a mamlaka filter, which is the Greek word for kingdom. So everything's got to be filtered through the kingdom. It's going to be a kingdom revival. It's not going to be a local church thing in the sense of for one or this group or that. Or this is a kingdom thing. This is for all. So everything's filtered through the kingdom filter and goes into the kingdom ecclesia vat. And then he says, okay, we're ready for the first pour. He calls the brother over and he says, you have 3 bottles, right? And yes, I have 3 bottles of fortified wine. I have a 1457 from the Huss Vineyard and a Martin 95 and a 1729 from the Holy Club. This is when I knew Greg didn't do this from his own mind. Because it was in 1457, from the ministry of John Huss, the Moravians were born. They were sort of the beginning force of the Reformation. A few years later, Martin 95, as in 1517, was Martin Luther's 95 Thesis. So this was the Moravian, the birth of the Moravians, obviously known for missions, prayer, and other things. But then came the Luther, the 95, and then the 1729 Holy Club with the Wesley brothers. So these were and by the way, the Wesleys, John Wesley was very influenced by the Moravians. So this first mix is from the Reformation. He poured these 3 bottles into the vat, and movement started in the vat. He said in the dream, the vat looked like it came alive. Then he built a catwalk. I kind of like this. He stayed up there and he built a catwalk before the next guy came up. It was 264 inches by 22 inches, 264 inches around, 22 inches wide. 2 words that in Hebrew, 22 and 264, mean the brotherhood of God as my Father. One word is brotherhood, the other word means God is my Father. So this was the God is my Father brotherhood. And after every pour, the person that poured it had to stay up there on that catwalk and intercede for the next person pouring theirs in, because it was a brotherhood of the God is my Father doing this together. Then Tim put the new filter on, and it was time for the second pour. And I called a young man over, one of my spiritual sons, and said, "You got some wine?" He said, "I got 2 bottles of full-bodied wine." I have the 1741 Angry God from Enfield Winery. I don't know if I'd want the Angry God wine or not, but. And the 1862 from Bounds Estate. So, 1741, Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. The exact date, the exact place, Enfield Winery. 1862, E.M. Bounds. First and second Great Awakenings. So after the Reformation is poured in there, now the reformers are interceding for the next group, and God takes what he did in the first and second Great Awakenings and he pours them into the vat. This was poured by, as I said, one of my spiritual sons, and he says to me in the dream, "Can I bring my son up here with me and have him pour this with me?" And I said, "Well, of course you can." Poured his in. We all began to weep, because from in the vat, after the wine of the first and second Great Awakenings were poured in, wails began to come out of the vat. But they weren't the wails of torment. They were wailings of repentance. Crying out for mercy from God. And people from the cloud of witnesses came into the room and watched and began to weep with us over this weeping vat. Then it was time for the third pour. I called a lady over from the room where the old wine was. I said, "Come over here, so-and-so." I know her. You know her. Live in it. Talked to her about this, so I won't give her name, but she's an apostolic leader in our movement. And I said, "You have the next pour, don't you?" And she said, "Yes, I do." She said, "I have 2 bottles. She brought 4 young women with her. a Native American, an Asian, a Black, and a Latino. A Native American, Asian American, Black American, Latino American. She said, we have 2 bottles of wine. We have a 1904 sweet rosé from the Roberts Breakout Estate and an 1857 Riesling from Fulton Street Estate. First one is Evan Roberts in Wales. It's the year the Welsh revival broke out. The second one was the Fulton Street revival. Both of them emphasized prayer. It was the ladies that were bringing us the intercession, without which we couldn't do. Not that it should just be the ladies, but it seems like for the most part it is. And when they poured this wine in, it became an aroma, a sweet fragrance filled the room. And it filled the room to the point where it not only got in our clothes, it got in us. And we became the aroma. And then it so permeated the atmosphere in the room that the atmosphere changed. And then the aroma that this created shot up through the ceiling of this wine cellar into the battlefield and covered the battlefield and then went right up into the heavens. As the prayer was mixed into this. Then the fourth pour. This person said, I have 3 bottles. I have an 1800 from the Red River wine collection. I have an 1801 miracle manifestation from the Cane Ridge Vineyard. And I have a 1915 vintage from Seymour's Hidden Face - Bruised Knees Vineyard. Did you get that? Hidden Face / Bruised Knees Vineyard. Seymour's. It's the Pentecost movement that Holy Spirit poured out at Red River, Cane Ridge, and Azusa, which ended in 1915. The angel, or Jim said as he read the recipe to us, these have to be poured in together. You can't pour these 3 in separately. If you pour them in simultaneously, they'll create a fire in the vat. And that fire will fuel the kingdom apostolic blend. Without it, he said, if you don't do it just right and get the fire from pouring them together, it'll become just another fad. But if you pour them together, it will create a fire that will cause it to burn with intensity and become the kingdom apostolic blend. So he poured them together into the Reformation and the awakenings and then the prayer and mixed it in with them at the same time. And it began to burn and then it began to glow and the vat began to glow. And it released a groan. He said in the dream, it sounded like the vat was about to explode. And then it began to expand and contract like it was breathing. You guys just want to get saved when I read this dream. Then he says, time for the fifth pour. And that was poured by both myself and Greg in the dream. He said, you have 2 bottles. And we said, yes, we have 2 bottles of old wine. We have the Lion's Heart 1727 and the 1806 Thunderbolt. And the Lion's Heart was from the tenant log house vineyard, who in 1727 started a log building, a Bible school in a log building that was a part of birthing the First Great Awakening. He preached about the fire of God, and he was one of the leaders among Whitfield in this awakening. He was a pioneer of pioneers. It is said that as many as 60 other Bible schools were spawned from this log house Bible school. And I found it fascinating that before we poured this one in, Jim said, stop. The recipe says we have to have a different filter before you pour this one in. And it was not just the Mamlaka Kingdom filter, it was the Mamlaka Moreh filter, which is a Hebrew word, means teacher. So this one had to have a teaching element to the filter. Because he said, if you put this on there when it's poured through, it will transform the wine into something that's easily seen, and people will be able to understand and see this wine for what it is because of the teacher filter. What does that say? He says, what God's about to do is reawaken the teaching gift along with the apostolic and prophetic and evangelistic and all these others. And some of us have been saying that for quite some time, that there's coming a reemergence of the teacher and the evangelist. All these things are going to start moving together and functioning together. But this pour had to be filtered through this teaching gift, the Bible college. But the Thunderbolt wine from 1807 was the Haystack Revival, Williams College, which birthed the modern missions movement. So this one represents teaching and missions. And they had to be poured together at the same time in order to produce what was needed. So now we have 12 movements that have been mixed together in this vat, which is full of life now. It's churning, it's expanding, there's fire in it. There's an aroma coming through it that gets into you and changes the battlefield and goes up into the heavens. And there are people on the catwalk interceding and praying in tongues in the dream. The fellowship or the God is my Father group. Well, I'm going to get to the end of this in a minute, the dream. But God is saying to us, I'm about to bring a synergistic blend of all these movements since the 1400s. They're all stored. They were on a shelf, these wine bottles, a little dusty and cobwebs, but they were all there. He said, I'm about to take each one off of the shelf. And the recipe has been found how to mix them all together. Miracles, holiness, apostolic teaching and evangelism and intercession and repentance and awakenings and missions. multiple, all the races, the melting pot thing, and all this is coming together. And it's being fought. And it's being fought by elements of the church, and it's being fought by the kingdom of darkness. But angels have been sent to escort us and get us with the recipe to the right place. God has hidden it underground, but he's about to show us what it is. And the battlefield is the shaking that's coming. We're in the battle now, but it's going to get more intense. And there was one point where we were being shot at from both directions. The enemy behind, the Antichrist religious crowd in front of us, and the angel had to come and do something supernatural, but he did. So Hodges speaks up and he says, the bottles are full, or the vat is full. It's all mixed and ready. Get the bottles ready, Tim. Had an arm that swung out that would release the wine into these new bottles. And he said, a new present day. This is a new present day apostolic blend. It hasn't been partaken of in the nation ever before. This is what's coming. Can you imagine the religious spirits that won't like this message about wine? A new present day apostolic blend. So get these bottles filled with this new wine and corked. And then these bottles come alive. And they turn into rockets. They're going to carry the new wine. And Jim says, we're ready now for Operation Paint the Target Release Awakening. Release Awakening. We climbed up the stairs to get out of this place, and the door had closed behind us when we came in. You had to do another voice-activated code to get it open. And I looked at Tim and said, you're going to do this one. And the code to open the door so we could release the new wine was Daniel 7:26-7. The court will convene for judgment, and his dominion, that's Satan, will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the empires will serve and obey him. And that was the code to open the door. And the bottles were launched onto the battlefield of America. And new wine covered all the nation. And it became so broad and prevalent that you could see rivers of wine running through the nation. I've said it 1,000 times. God is not finished with America. He's committed to this restoration. He is so committed that he's going to get it to us, even though he's going to have to create some challenging times to do it. But he's going to do it because Our destiny is not to be wealthy and powerful. I've said that 1,000 times. Our destiny is to be a voice of the gospel of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. And the wine he's about to give us is not just a wine for us to drink. We're already drinking the wine. This is a new apostolic wine for the battlefield. It's a wine to be poured out on this nation and the nations of the earth to produce signs, wonders, miracles, groanings of intercession that produce revivals, first, second awakening, Cane Ridge, Red River, Welsh Revival, Azusa Street, all wrapped up together into one. Miracles will be poured out. Salvation will occur. This is what is coming, and he's going to get this done. He's going to get this accomplished. And he said, this recipe is precious. You must not blow this, ecclesia. You must not drop the ball on this. Whatever price we have to pay, we're going to have to pay the price. We've been paying. I feel that. I feel the movement, the apostolic, prophetic prayer movement stepped up to the plate the last few months. There have been a lot of people added to our numbers lately. I have people, I couldn't be any more shocked about some of the people, the letters we get, people that are watching these 15s. We're up close to 100 million views on all the platforms put together, either have watched or read them. We're somewhere up in the 90 or close to 100 million. You know why? Because people are desperate. And there are people out there that they didn't come through the movement many of us came through. They didn't come through a prayer movement. They didn't come through a prophetic movement. They didn't come through an apostolic movement. Use some words that we've used for 25, 30 years, and they write us emails and say, what is that? What do you mean? Would you teach some more on that? I say, well, I've been teaching on it for 25 years. I've never heard of it. But they're out there, and there's a desperate, hungry people. And it's growing, by the way. Because you don't have to be prophetic anymore to see how messed up things are. You know, 5, 10 years ago, you had to be somewhat prophetic to see where this was going and what was happening, but you don't have to be prophetic anymore. So there's a desperation, and there's something that's happening in people that it's just sort of a, I don't know what's happening, but I just know this is not good. And there's something that's awakening in people also that is I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how this can be fixed. I don't know if we can recover from this. So there's this desperation. And it's preceding this shaking that's going to just do what it needs to do to bring us back to our senses, create this hunger. And God's creating both at the same time. And all these dreams and visions we've had about revival and awakening, we're coming into the season where this is about to manifest. And one of the things you have to keep in the forefront of your thinking right now in your mind when you pray into this, one of the things you have to keep there is that we're not trying to get God to do something. He's not trying to figure out whether or not he wants to do this or is willing to do it. We're feeling the burden because he so wants to do it. He so wants this harvest. He so wants the nations. He so wants to reach people that have never heard. He so wants to deliver this confused generation that doesn't know if they're a man or a woman, and who am I and what am I, and this whole mess. He's so ready to deliver. He's ready to bring a spirit of deliverance to a nation. We're not just going to see individuals delivered. We're going to see rooms full of people delivered. We're going to see cities full of people delivered. We're going to see campuses delivered with people all over the place, laying around on the ground, vomiting up demons and manifesting because they're being delivered by the thousands. We're going to see miracles that are extraordinary, that get the attention of cities and nations. This is going to happen because this is who he is. This is who he is. His name is Savior, Redeemer. We know he can, but some people just don't believe he wants to. They think they love people more than he does. They forget that we love him because he first loved us. This God of love is coming to rescue nations in this hour. I'm talking about nations. Are you listening to me? Entire nations. Entire nations are going to be set free in this hour. He loves them that much. He is determined to do this. And he's going to shake whatever he needs to shake. He's going to get rid of whoever he needs to get rid of. And he's going to pour his spirit out, this new wine. He's going to shoot it in rockets out to the battlefield of the earth, until rivers of apostolic wine flow in the earth. Rivers of wine. I mean, you read about some of this stuff in history. You start thinking about God putting them all together. What could it be but a world-shaking revival? He saved the best wine for last. Some of you didn't get that. He has saved the best wine for last. And it's now. We get to drink it. We get to pour it out. We get to take it to the nations of the earth. I say this, you can just stay on your feet because I don't know where to go from here anyway. I don't think anybody really knows fully what this looks like. How can we? The earth has never seen what he's about to do. Yeah, there's a tidal wave of some shaking coming, but I tell you what, there's a bigger tidal wave of revival coming. And I'm not just talking about here. There is a bigger worldwide tsunami. It's building steam right now. The earthquake needed to get it going is already rumbling in the deep places of the earth. The winds are already starting to blow, and the tide is already rising, and this thing is starting to gain momentum. Now you watch the shaking of nations begin. And it's going to get violent, and it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be warfare in the spirit. I don't know about the natural maybe, but I can tell you this much. It will be supernatural. And not only will it be demonically supernatural, it will be heavenly supernatural, because he is determined to win this war in the heavens and rule the nations of the earth. He promised them to his Son. And he will keep his promise. I want to say that one more time. He promised the nations to his Son, and he will keep his promise. So, Lord, we decree over this gathering and over this nation and the nations of the earth that the King has already been installed. And Daniel 7:26-7 is already written. And the kingdoms of the earth belong to you. And you've stored up in the wine cellar of heaven all of these past moves of your Spirit, the awakening, the reformations, all the way back to the Wesley boys and the Moravians who prayed for 100 years, and Martin Luther and his 95 Theses. Lord, you've got it all stored up in the wine cellar. The first Great Awakening and the second Great Awakening, both of which saved this nation from destruction. And Lord, you've got the ladies now, and they've stepped into their role in this movement. They preach, they deliver, they lead, they prophesy, they're apostolic intercessors. They know how to do it now. We know they do. Their prayers have created an aroma that has infected all of us. I probably pray today because my grandmama prayed. And my mama prayed. Every day of her life, my grandmother knelt by her bed and called my name out to heaven. And the aroma must please you in amazing ways. But it's here now, and we smell like this. We smell like prayer. We have the aroma of intercession and worship. It's in us now. It's not just in our clothing. It's marked us. That was the word in the dream. We were marked by an aroma. Lord, you poured out your Spirit. Thank you for Seymour, faceless, bruised knees man the world didn't know anything about, but you knew where he was. And you answered his cry. The world has never been the same. And the missions, the teaching and missions movement, this is for the nations. This is for the nations you love. This is for those that have still never heard. This is for those that have been locked in prisons built by principalities and demons and false religions for thousands of years, and this wine is for them. It's for them. It's for them. Give us this. Give us this wine. Give it to us.